Hello and welcome back to week 3 of our Lent video series. It's wonderful to have you back with us. And this week we're actually starting the Easter story proper now, but perhaps not in the place that you might have expected. So if you'd like to read along with us, we're going to be reading from John chapter 12, the very beginning of that chapter. So feel free to read along with us if you'd like. If you're familiar with the church or familiar with the Bible, you may well know this story. You've likely heard it before, and the heading is often something like Jesus anointed at Bethany. And it's the story of two sisters, each showing their love and devotion to Jesus, albeit in two very different ways. Just before Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, he arrives at his friend's house for dinner. And this is what the beginning of John 12 has to say. 6 days before the Passover celebration began, Jesus arrived in Bethany, the home of Lazarus, the man he had raised from the dead. A dinner was prepared in Jesus' honour. Martha served, and Lazarus was among those who ate with him. Then Mary took a 12-ounce jar of expensive perfume, made from the essence of nard, and she anointed Jesus' feet with it, wiping his feet with her hair. The whole house was filled with the fragrance. But Judas Iscariot, the disciple who would soon betray him, said, "That perfume was worth a year's wages. It should have been sold and the money given to the poor." Not that he cared for the poor, he was a thief, and since he was in charge of the disciples' money, he often stole some for himself. Jesus replied, "Leave her alone. She did this in preparation for my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me." So there you go, a few verses from the beginning of John chapter 12. So it's got me thinking, if you were to show elaborate devotion to someone, what would you do? Those of you who know me well and listen to me talk, I talk a lot about food. Yes, I know, not exactly a surprise to those who know me. So naturally, showing devotion, it would come through food for me. If I really wanted to impress someone, I'd cook them a posh meal, something like scallops with peas and pancetta, a nice prosecco sauce, followed by a big hunk of steak for the main, and a lovely peppercorn sauce as well. There we go, that's what I would do, I think. Or maybe like some smoked pulled pork or brisket or something, that sounds good too. I'm just hungry now, apparently, as you can tell. So many people have a love for food, and people use it as a love language, and we all like a nice meal, so that's probably how I would go about it. So when we read this story, if you're anything like me, instinctively you think, we think, that Martha is the hero here, preparing the fancy steak for Jesus. But what we don't quite understand is what's going on with her sister's actions, with what Mary is doing. Partly because we're living 2,000 years later, so let's try and unpack that a bit, shall we? Believe it or not, it was perfectly normal to wash people's feet, or wash the guests' feet at the start of a dinner, especially if, like Jesus, they were a guest of honour. But remember, Jesus wasn't wearing his Converses or his Timberlands, he wasn't wearing socks with his sandals, he just had sandals on their own. His feet would have looked rough. The dust and the stones and the muck from the road would have kicked up all over his feet that are used to walking here, there and everywhere rather than getting in a car or a bus or a train or anything like that. So much like a modern day ballerina or footballer, his feet would have been grim. They would have looked disgusting probably. So it wouldn't have been the nicest of jobs, hence why it was reserved for a position of honour. But it was a normal thing to happen, that people a guest of honour would have their feet washed. After washing the guest's feet, if they were especially important, especially honoured, they may get a little dab of oil on their forehead. Mary doesn't get that far though. She doesn't get as far as Jesus' head because she finds a bottle of perfume worth tens of thousands of pounds in today's money and pours it all over his feet and then wipes it with her hair. Again, if you're like me, you're probably thinking I'd have preferred the Japanese Wagyu steak and the scallops, to be honest, that Martha was getting ready around the corner, than have my feet dripping with perfume and then wiped with some person's hair. But to pour perfume out on Jesus' feet was to say that he was so wonderful, so amazing, so important, so honoured, that even this outrageously expensive perfume worth a year's salary wasn't good enough for his head. Then a Jewish woman untying her hair would have been the height of scandal. It was associated with loose morals and wild living. But Mary literally couldn't give a monkey's what anyone thought, what it might have looked like. She's so overflowing with love and devotion to Jesus that she bows in complete and utter humility, lavishing him with this perfume all over his feet. As Jesus said, Mary was getting him ready for his burial. She poured out her love before he died, rather than afterwards. As a church, we've just been finishing a series looking through Paul's letter to the churches in Rome. And one of his big themes throughout the letter is being devoted to God and being devoted to others, loving God and loving others. Mary was completely and utterly, head over heels, devoted and in love with Jesus. And she made sure to show it. She didn't leave any room for imagination. Everyone there would have known. We might not be able to do something as remarkable or as lavish as Mary did with the expensive perfume worth your whole year's salary. But perhaps today and this week you might think, what do Mary's actions show us about what it means to be devoted? What does it tell us about devotion? And then more personally, how can you show devotion to God today and this week? How can you show devotion to others today and this week?